there have been ebbs and flows, as there are any season, but it feels very dramatic with the Ottawa Senators. You think of certain players like Shane Pinto going 19 games without a point and then being one of the most valuable players in the next half of the season. You look at Drake Batherson, complete opposite. He started out so hot. He's been ice cold recently. Brady Tkachuk had that 10-game pointless streak. Otherwise, he's had game-winning goals in overtime. He's played well at times. Tim Stützle's on a career-high 9-game point streak right now. Linus Ullmark went 8-0-1 in 9-game stretch. He's had other stretches that aren't good.
Jake Sanderson started the season off slow. Now he's figured it out. Like, it's the ebbs and flows of, you can pretty much go down the entire lineup, Ross, and no one's really been that consistent.
So what consistency do they need to find in these last 25 games to make the playoffs?
Well, Ross, this one kind of ties into our trade deadline targets, but if the Ottawa Senators want to figure out one of their biggest issues internally, I've mentioned this a couple times, so I'm going to stick to it. David Perron's going to have to really figure it out. Like, he was brought in my opinion, to be that sixth guy to fill in the top six. They gave him a 2-year deal, $4 million. They expect somewhere in the 35 to 40 point range for him. And it's been tough sledding for him. He only has 1 goal and 3 assists in 19 games this year. And he hasn't been able to find a line where he fits nicely. He hasn't really been able to put a big impact on any games. Like, I can't really think of like a David Perron moment this year. So
that one timer that was saved against Florida, it might hit the post in the home opener. That was cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's if we're chalking it down to that and the first game of the year, then it's tough to really have a lot to show for David Perron. But I don't know. I believe in the player, and the Ottawa Senators, Steve Stais, certainly believed in him and is expecting more from him. So unless the Ottawa Senators are going to go and figure this problem out externally, which maybe they do with some of our targets that we're going to look at, David Perron for me is the guy that is going to have to figure things out to make this team work.
And we always have to preface it by saying, obviously, the family situation was most important, but it seems like everything's healthy on that front, which is amazing news. Great to hear. But if you had told me preseason that on February 25th, David Perron would be tied in points with Matthew Highmore and Zach Ostapchuk, I would have had a very raised eyebrow at that. So he needs to get it going, get consistency into his game, and hopefully get a couple of big moments. Like you said, like, he needs to have moments where it's like, oh yeah, David Perron scored that big goal when we needed it. Like, think even Nick Jensen has a few of those moments. The Carolina game where it was 1-0 and then he scores a huge goal. He scores the goal against Boston that started the 2-goal comeback. Like, you need to have moments where it helps your team vault into getting points. So David Perron, a very good first choice as a guy who needs a huge final 25 games. Pilsy, I'm going to go with another obvious choice, Drake Batherson. When he's on, the team's on. And this is obviously health permitting for all of them. Like, you could easily say Josh Norris and Shane Pinto have to stay healthy. Duh. This is for guys who are healthy, what they have to do in the lineup. And when Drake Batherson's at his best, he's drawing defenders into him and then distributing the puck with his great vision. He's got great hands. I didn't know he had the hardest shot on the team. Hopefully that's a bit of a confidence booster where he can go and rip the pill and try to get some shots on goal and create more that way. But it just feels like he's been a bit of a half step behind recently. It almost feels like he's playing like he did when he came back from that high ankle sprain. And then it felt like he got past it. He had an extra jump. He was finishing his hits there in the first half of the season. And it feels like he's skating in mud a little bit right now. So I'd like to see Batherson pick up the pace in the offensive zone and just in a 200-foot setting. And I don't think I'm going to get that point per game Batherson hot take anymore. It was looking good through 40 games, not so much anymore. But if he can be a point per game player in these last 25 games and get 25 points, I think the Sens have a good chance at making playoffs.
Yeah, and I think Josh Norris coming back really helps out. But for me, Ross, with Batherson, it's not even the pace that's bothered me. It's been the decision-making, right? Like, look back at that game up against Montreal. Just so many poor decisions that led directly to goals. Like, let's talk about that first goal where Brendan Gallagher scores. Even at Batherson's beside his own net, and he tries to make a cross ice pass through the slot. Even if he doesn't fan on that pass, Ross, that's not a good play. Like that shouldn't be your first instinct is, oh, I'm in my own end. Let's try to force a pass through the slot where there's a Montreal player right there. And then like what at best you get a breakout, like if Gallagher doesn't knock that down or deflect it and he fans on the pass, worst case scenario, and Gallagher buries it. But there've just been a couple decisions where I didn't really love it. Like even the one, it works out for him, but where on the power play, he passed back to Sanderson. There was 3 Montreal Canadian penalty killers, defenders right there, and all of them had eyes on him and sticks in the lane. Now he gets a great sauce pass right on the tape to Sandy, and Sandy makes no mistake. So it's tough to kind of nitpick that, but that's not the best decision on the power play, in my opinion, even though it works out. So that's where I think Batherson, just his decision making, hopefully coming back from the break, you can kind of figure things out again. But yeah, Batherson is a huge part of this team.
So 2 wingers that really need to step up. There's no doubt about that. There's many other players obviously have to continue playing well. Tim Stützle on that 9-game point streak. He's been awesome defensively as well. So he needs to keep it going. But I think that Perron and Batherson are the 2 guys who need to improve off of their play in the recent time to make a push forward.